Hello, everybody. Thank you all for coming, and welcome to the first lecture of the 2014-2015 Artist Lecture Series. Yeah, yay. My name is Ann Friedman. I'm director of Evergreen Gallery, and today I'm very pleased to be introducing Deidi von Schaewen. Her exhibition, titled Sacred Trees of India, opens later today, 5 o'clock in Evergreen Gallery. I hope you can all be there. You would definitely fill the space a couple times over, so that'd be great if you could all come. Since this is the first lecture of the year, I have a number of important announcements, so I'm going to read, make sure I don't miss anything. First, about the lecture series. It happens here on 4 to 5 Wednesdays each quarter, and it will be happening the next 2 weeks, next 2 Wednesdays. The schedule is online, and you can find a link to that schedule at the Evergreen Gallery website, which is evergreen.edu/gallery. The talks are usually about an hour long, followed by questions from the audience, and that usually keeps us here till about 1 o'clock. Please don't be coming and going during the talk. The light from the doors and the sounds are distracting to others, and also this is being video recorded so that it will live on in posterity as a great event at Evergreen State College. And do please stay for the questions and answers. This is considered part of the lecture itself and is often very enlightening in ways that we can't imagine when we're sitting and listening to the lecture. So I want to thank Ben Hargett and everyone in electronic media for their technical support for these artist lectures, and also they've been a big help in the installation in Evergreen Gallery. So thank you to Ben and all of them. Next, I'd like to talk with you about Evergreen Gallery. For some of you, this is your first few weeks at Evergreen, and you might not be familiar with the gallery yet. It's located in the library building near the clock tower. The gallery program has existed since the beginning of the college, and it's been in this space since 2009. Deidi's artwork looks really good in there, and so I have many other exhibitions. The gallery shows art by professional artists, local, national, and international, and ends the school year with a senior thesis show by students of Evergreen. The space itself is designed to be flexible and show works in any media. And I'm saying way more than usual about the gallery because this year the gallery program is facing budget issues, which could lead to the end of the program by the end of 2015. So a year from now might be the end of Evergreen Gallery. This doesn't have to happen if we all get involved. Students can have a big impact here at Evergreen, so I hope you do get involved if you care about the future of the gallery program. We're going to start a list of email addresses for anyone who wants to be notified about future actions that we'll be taking to sustain the gallery program. The list will be in the gallery, so please come by, see the art, and sign up to help preserve the gallery for the future. The regular gallery hours starting tomorrow are Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So Evergreen Gallery's fall exhibition is Sacred Trees of India, photographs by today's speaker, Deidi von Schaewen. Before talking a little bit about Deidi, I'd also like to thank Ryan Richardson for overseeing the printing of her photographs, and thank everyone in Photoland for their help in general on this exhibition. I first became aware of Deidi's work over 20 years ago, and I was impressed by her vision and commitment to photography and film. I've been following her work since then, and fortunately, I can see much of it in beautiful books that show the world in a special way. Deidi is based in Paris and travels the world, immersing herself in different cultures, finding the heart of places and people, recording these in photographs and films. She has been spending time in India for the past 28 years, and when you see the exhibition, you'll feel the depth of her experiences there. Her 20-plus books range in subject from fantasy worlds to living in Berlin, from inside Africa to gardens of Provence. and a book on the sacred trees of India is in the works. She has exhibited extensively throughout Europe, India, North Africa, and now in North America too. And she's done installations outdoors as well as exhibitions, such as the one you'll see in Evergreen Gallery. So, enough from me. Please join me in welcoming Deidi von Schaewen.
Thank you, Anne, for this warm welcome, and thank you all for coming. It's a big audience. I was told maybe there will be 30 people. I'm quite surprised. Now, I went to art school in Berlin. This, as you know, as you see very well, is my self-portrait. It's my reflection in the gutter, actually. And so I was first to become teacher of art, but I knew I was going to move around the world, and as a teacher of art in Germany, you could only teach in one land, not even in the whole country. So I shifted. I knew I wasn't going to do that, but one often studies something to support if something else doesn't work. So I thought to become a painter. But then I discovered the darkroom. Somebody had taken, is the sound okay? Yeah, okay. Somebody had taken some pictures. We had one very good thing in school. We had to touch on a lot of subjects. We had to work with metal, we had to work with wood, we had to work with plaster, with marionettes. We had to do workshops on all sorts of things, which is fantastic when you go to school. We did engraving, we did silkscreen. No, that's the only thing we didn't do. We did lithographs, and so it actually was a very good school and opened up a lot of possibilities. So I discovered photography, I discovered the darkroom, and the next day I went to East Berlin and bought a cheap camera, a Russian camera, and I started photography. Now let me see if yeah, I'll do it now. Okay. So I went out with my new camera, and in the first 10 films, I photographed a wall. And I was very much impressed by it. And I wanted to take some details, like this kind of running out, the priests up there. So I got some money together and bought a telelens and went back to photograph the details. And the wall was covered by a scaffolding. So I was so shocked that I thought, well, if that happens, if this is gone, I have to photograph walls. And so I started photographing walls all over Berlin. This is what I found. I did street by street. I took the S-Bahn. I went to East Berlin. I got almost arrested because they said, what the hell are you doing with these old things? Why don't you photograph the new things? I found images like this. I started my first time. I did that at that time, and that one was, no, sorry. Sorry. The one on the right side is 10 years later. These are what you call Brandmauer, when one building was torn down during the war. So I said goodbye to art. I did a few more things. These are the last drawings I did, and then I stopped. And since you always, when you want to do something, or sometimes you do something else on the side, if photography doesn't work, so I did graphic design with Helmut Lorz, very good professor, in the same school but a different building, and went into studying graphic design, being the art director, and embarked on many, many things with lettering. At the time we still had wooden letters and metal letters. and had lots of fun. This was a sequence, you know, all sorts of different things that you can do with the letter A. You can roll it, you can make a ball and open it and roll it up, you can burn it, you can cut it in round, you can make shadows. So it was very interesting and amazing. We did lots of posters, etc. This is a D from the Wall of Berlin. I hated the wall so much that I never took any pictures. I only took 3 letters, SED, which was the East Communist Party, because they were so beautifully running down, and I used the D as my logo, and I still use it. I've used it as photocopies, and I printed it once when the wall came down. So while studying, I got some jobs for doing exhibitions for the government for the city of Berlin, with a friend who was very good in drawing, making collages and so on. And so the next thing after this, I was invited by Peter Harnden, an American architect living in Barcelona, to work with him on the pavilion for Expo 67 in Montreal, Man and His Health. It was a Canadian theme pavilion. The exterior was by Erickson Macy. It was next to Habitat. And for 1 year, I was traveling quite a bit. The construction was being done in New York. I went to WHO to select photographs. I went to the Museum of Natural History in London, went through there the whole day and said, I would like to have this and that, you know, old historical machines to open up your head in metal, or Chinese dolls. You open up the stomach and the baby's inside, and engravings and drawings and all sorts of things. All day long I said, I would like. And then I walked out of there and I said, is this going to arrive? But it did arrive. This was the time when DNA was just discovered. You see it up here, the spiral. Unfortunately, I don't have many pictures. I only found 2. These were showcases with embedded organs that we got from Cologne. So this was a 1.5 year work. Then I came back to Spain. And in the meantime, I'd done a trip south and photographed this building, Xanadu by Ricardo Bofill. I was down there with a cousin. She was an architect, so we were doing kind of an architectural trip. And I showed these pictures to Ricardo, and he said, why don't you do all my pictures? So overnight, I became an architectural photographer and did, you know, all these buildings at the time that he was doing in Barcelona. This was in the 60s. He was, I think, the most interesting architect at the time. I'm not sure if you're aware of him, of his work. Afterwards, he changed quite a bit. He did a lot of things in Paris, but then he had a lot of political problems, and he couldn't be as free as he was in Barcelona. But if you're not aware of his work, you should look him up. At the same time, I discovered the first wrap building. It was actually not this building, but it was something like it. It was the Corte Inglés, and I photographed it. I was absolutely, I had several very deep experiences in my life, like the walls. You know, I photographed one wall, and I know then that's the walls. So I photographed the wrap building, and I knew now it was wrap buildings. And Peter Harnden said to me when I showed him a print, do you know Christo? I said, no, who is that? And so it was at the same time that Christo did his first projects. Then I moved to New York. I always wanted to go to New York, but when I was young, I couldn't go because I had a dog and I couldn't ask my mother to take care of the dog. So I moved there in '69 and continued the walls. They were a bit different, but I actually felt very much at home immediately in New York because it was like Berlin. It wasn't that different. And besides, you know, on the walls, when That was the time of pop art. When the first exhibition of pop art came to Berlin, when I was still a student, I wasn't that surprised because I had seen all these things in the walls already. You know, the big advertising, the advertising was enormous in the walls. Then I started doing things. I wanted to do these things in silk screens, but I never did. But I still now do sometimes these red outlines. I got a job, was very lucky, with Herb Lubalin, who was at that time the best designer in typography and other things. But he was specialized in typography. You probably know his name. He invented avant-garde typeface. He invented the condensed type. So he made it to a point that it was almost unreadable. And for the first time, you know, I was coming from a background, Helvetica and Swiss, more Swiss typography and so on. So I was confronted to his typography, which was, in maybe 3 lines, you had 15 cuts to adjust one word to the other, to make it flush left, flush right, or to do all sorts of things. He was really you can do that now in a computer, but you can never do it to the point where Herb Lubalin was able to do it. Today it's a different thing, but he was the best typographer then. So at one point they had a job to do a George Jensen construction barricade on Madison Avenue, and one of his partners was working on it. And I didn't like what he was doing. I thought it was very boring. So I went up there once at lunchtime and looked at this thing. And then something that I had done in Berlin, the thing down here, came to my mind watching that wooden construction barricade. This thing is maybe 5 by 5 centimeters. So something I'd done as a student, 5 by 5 centimeters, came back to my mind, was actually this. And out of this, I did this. And the job was accepted. I was going to do it in fiberglass. No, not fiberglass, but fiber, you know, kind of molded. Unfortunately, we didn't have the budget, so we did it with stapling plastic on the board. And it became this, Madison Avenue. These on the right side I designed too, by the way. And on top is Herb Lubalin's design for the wall in CBS. Then I became a photographer again. Herb sent me to Jamaica for 6 weeks to photograph 50 hotels. And I had a helicopter for 2 days to photograph the 50 hotels from the air. It was one of the most amazing trips and one of the most amazing things I've done in my life. I've done other helicopter trips after, but this was just incredible. I got also involved through a friend in theater. He directed Black Sun by Antonin Artaud at the MAMA. You can see there on the right, where is it? There's scaffolding with projections. I designed the set with scaffoldings, and we did projections, and we had wind machines behind it. New York was the time of all sorts of demonstration, New York, Washington, and other places. I did many photographs of that. Other posters for theater. And then Robert Cordier, said, the way you do theater, I did also a lot of theater photography. The way you do theater photography, you can do film. I want you to shoot my next feature film. I said, you're crazy. No, you do it. So I borrowed a camera from Arakawa, the artist, and shot 3 rolls of black and white handheld. And then I was director of photography on a feature film in New York. We even blocked. It was quite a violent film. It was supposed to be called Wild Orange, but when Clockwork Orange came out, we had to change the title and we called it Injun Fender. So this girl, she's black. It's a story of a rock star and a black girlfriend and a white girlfriend, and they kill each other. So this is the black one being killed in the street. Then we took the film to Paris. We were invited to the Toulon Festival and got a prize there. And then from that we were invited in Mannheim, got another prize, and Locarno, and got another prize. So in the meantime, we met Belgian producers. They wanted to do the next film with Robert. That was supposed to be Eugénie de Franval by Marquis de Sade. So that's incest, that's all sorts of terrible things. And that in 1972. Depardieu, you probably know him, was supposed to play the Marquis de Sade, and he had agreed it. At that time, he had done his first film, but it hadn't come out, so he was not the star. But Robert saw him and said, that's the next star in France, and he was right. This film, our film was censored for 2 years in France because one of the black guys said 5 times motherfucker. That was enough to be censored for 2 years in France until the Minister of Culture finally released it. So you can imagine that a film on Marquis de Sade was out of the question at the time. But we were in Paris. One of the first people I met was André Putman. Through her, we met a lot of people. I started working with her. All the nightlife opened up because she was quite a night owl. I designed her first letterhead when she opened up her first office. The first catalog was very small. You know, there was no money at the time, but it was a nice little object. And then I became an interior photographer. Here's the Morgan's Hotel in New York. I did most of her chantiers of her design. Then later on, all sorts of many other photographers got in. But I did all the first things. Then we had the opportunity to do a film on Ricardo Bofill in Paris for the French television. There we were 2 cameras. I was the second camera, and we had a Swiss cameraman. At the time, he had won the Concours of Les Halles. I had spent the night photographing his model in the mairie. All the other concurrents took out their project because they thought I was a spy. And so if he had won this, Paris would look different today. Unfortunately, then Chirac came in as a mayor, and he stopped this project and got some of his friends to design it. And that's why we have this unfortunately terrible thing in the middle of Paris right now. The whole was already done. That he couldn't have changed. But the center of Paris would be a reasonable place today, and not the shambles it is. Unfortunately, I mean, he would have kept the Halles. Everybody in his right mind would have kept the Halles. Those were beautiful buildings in metal, and all sorts of things could have been done with it. So this is one of the shots during the film. With Loulou de la Falaise, you might know her. She was an assistant of Yves Saint Laurent and a very good friend of Ricardo's. Another thing I did is I photographed many letters. So I did a whole alphabet, and there was a show in Paris about lettering. I showed the alphabet, used it for Hachette, Taschen, and continued the walls. Paris was rich in walls, and I did trips to Brussels. Paris was like a complete I mean, there was broken down walls everywhere. So it was fantastic for me, and I could add many, many things to the collection. I always had the system of doing many things of one wall so I could blow them up big. Because at that time there was, besides using a 4x5 camera, was no way of making big images. And since I always travel a lot, I don't do one picture and you set it up and take so much time. I do many things. So for me, it was much easier to do 35 or 6x7 and then make it up in bigger images. A staircase photographed as a staircase. And then timepieces. Here you have like the same picture 1 week later. Every detail, 1 week later. Changing in 1 week. Here you have a timepiece. Between every sequence is 2 months. So you see the degradation in 2 months. Here it's 7 years. And you will see the detail of this 7 years later. This. It was paper. It was very beautiful. And I had thought of taking this, ripping it off when I left Barcelona. But then when I found it again 7 years later, I was glad I hadn't taken it off because it gave me the possibility of doing these pictures. Then one thing I discovered in France was Dr. Pierre. It's an advertising for dentifrice toothpaste. I discovered 12 different walls. On the right side, you see the same wall in winter, summer, fall, and then unfortunately they cut it off. I was supposed to keep on doing this for the next few years, but they cut the wine off. These are other Dr. Pierres that I discovered. The same ones in color. Then I had my first show in 1974 in the Musée National d'Art Moderne. It was the first show in the history of the museum on photography. And it was Jean-Hubert Martin who invited me, who later did the show Les Magiciens de la Terre, where he put together for the first time artists from 50% of artists from the West and 50% artists from Africa, Asia, and all the other countries. And which I probably heard about it was the 25 years ago, the Magicien de la Terre. So he invited me to do this show, and the director of the museum told him, how do you dare to show photography in our museum? He got really hit over the head. Then I had a show in Marion Goodman, but at the time it was multiples Marion Goodman. We showed black and white photographs and color photographs in 1975. I had actually met her in Basel at the art fair. At that time I had been in Basel and showed her a portfolio, and she said, well, yeah, come show. I'll give you a show. This was possible then. Today it's not possible anymore to go to Basel Art Fair and show your portfolio to a gallery. Today everybody's only involved in money, making money selling. They don't want to see young people and give you a show, I think. And for this show I had done a portfolio on Dr. Pierre with the 12 prints, and on the right side I had seen the last owner of Dr. Pierre, and he had given me the last empty toothpaste. I also had 2 full ones, and I brushed my teeth once with Dr. Pierre. I still have 1 full one. And when I came in there, they said, it's so amazing. Yesterday, we sent out the last 3,000 tubes to, it was some country in Africa, I forgot which one. But they also gave me the last paper bags, plastic bags. And in the plastic bags is the whole history of Dr. Pierre. His birth certificate, his papers as a student, his doctorate, and the history of the factory. And I had 12 of these made. And we presented this. Dr. Pierre was bought by an American company, I forgot which one, but a big, big company. And we invited them to the show. They didn't even buy this. So that's how much photography was bought at the time. Nothing. Then upper and lowercase, this was a magazine run by Herb Luberlin and Smith Carnese. They published something on the walls. And in 1977, the book on walls came out. I'd been twice to Frankfurt at the book fair. The first time I met all the publishers, the future publishers, but nothing was decided. And the second year when I went, there were four of them together. They said, well, now we're talking about the book for 1 year, let's do it. So it was a co-production of Pantheon, Thames and Hudson, Andreas Lanzhoff in Amsterdam, a French publisher, Dumont Schaumburg, and Shupinsha in Japan. So 6 publishers, and they published 40,000, which was an enormous amount at the time. But don't think you make any money with it either. But that I never expected anyway. When the book came out, I was lucky and have a little show in the Centre Georges Pompidou, 1977. This was a little leaflet they brought out. And I showed them in, already, I used the widest print possible, black and white. So that was 1.20 meters at the time, by 1.80 meters high. You'll see I haven't changed much, It's still a very good way to show it. Then there was a show in ICC. And the week after the show, during the show, in Beaubourg, I thought to myself, my God, now I have to find something else. Do I ever find something else, or is this the end? And I had gone through one little street next to the Centre Georges Pompidou, and I saw everything that I was going to do for the next 15 years in that one little street. I took one film, black and white, but I couldn't find the image this time, so I can't show it to you. But then at the ICC, it became this. This is a drawing. This is not the actual photograph. So it was sidewalks. From then on, it was sidewalks with all sorts of implications, all sorts of things. Became sidewalks of the world, and I did get a grant to go around the world for that. The walls continued. I did a bar in Barcelona, a club, always using, many images to make big images. Then I did more film with Isa Hesse. We filmed actually with the copyrights of Hermann Hesse, because she was married to his son. And then I did a film on Man Ray. I had met Man Ray in Cadaqués while I was working there with Peter Harnden. One day, when I'd come back from Montreal, exhausted, he said, go to the house and have a rest. And there was the book on the shelf, The Life of Man Ray, and I read it. And then next day, there was a party, and there was a little man with sunglasses sticking out, and he was presented to me, and I said, well, I'm a painter, and I live in Paris. And after 10 minutes, I said, well, sorry, I didn't get your name. Man Ray. I didn't leave him much, I sticked around with him that night, I think. And his wife was there also, Juliet. And then took him home I had a Volkswagen with an open roof. And so he came often to Cadaqués, and also Duchamp. Going back to Cadaqués, and one day I was sitting in Militon, where everybody, there were only 3 cafes at the time. And there was Man Ray, Duchamp playing chess. And I didn't have a camera on me, but I felt like stupid going home, getting a camera and photographing them. I didn't know by that time that this photograph doesn't exist. I wish I'd done it. I wish I'd gone home. Now, you would take out your iPhone and it would click, click. At the time, it was different. So that's the positive side of iPhones. Well, there are many others. So anyway, I met Man Ray many times in Paris. This is a picture I took with him. He had always, he always loved sunglasses. So he had glasses with actually wipers, with window wipers. So I did a 52-minute film on him when they had the big show in Centre Georges Pompidou. It was co-produced by Beaubourg, and we showed it on Westdeutscher Rundfunk. It was shown on Channel 13 at the time, and on 2 or 3 other television stations. Now it's dormant in the closet of the production because they think that there's a problem with the rights. But I have to get time and try and solve that problem. In the film, I have Juliette Man Ray, Tini Duchamp, Meret Oppenheim, and Philippe Sopeau, that was the last surviving Dadaist at the time. And I have no commentary on the film, but it's all Man Ray's voice, because he gave 2 lectures in San Francisco and Los Angeles. And the film opens him saying, I don't know who my public is going to be, but they certainly know who I am. This is Man Ray. So it was, he was very funny. Just to show that I didn't only shoot walls and things like this. I shot people, and I actually have quite a few, but Richard Lindner, Philip Stark. And this was one day of an underwater camera. It got stolen the next day. And I also did a lot of architecture photography. I continued doing that, because you have to make money. So this was a good way to make money. Because in those days, nobody would buy photography. And it was impossible to even think of living from your photographs. Maybe 3 people could do it at the time, but most of them were also professors. So a lot of architecture photography. There I also used 4x5s, but I never did it for my own projects. Then I was invited to participate in an exhibition, an architecture biennale. It was an art biennale in architecture in the same building in the Grande Halle in Paris. We were 2 photographers. We had to photograph one. The other photographer was much more involved in people, and me more in pure architecture. But not only. We were supposed to do 25 buildings in 12 countries, and once I had to go around the world to do five buildings. And so I went to Tokyo, Osaka, Tadeo Ando, and then I went to Los Angeles to do the Aerospace Museum by Frank Gehry, and the building of Jan in Chicago. I had a ticket around the world with Pan Am, and Pan Am was on strike, so it wasn't so easy. And I had to be back before Monday morning because they were supposed to be developed for Thursday, printed for Friday, and the opening was on Saturday. And when I got there, they said, well, we are sorry, but Jean Nouvel wasn't capable of closing off it was the outside of a building, closing it off, and so we couldn't get it dark enough. So we have to postpone the architectural opening. So, the art got all the ministers, and we got only one, like 2 months later. Scaffoldings continued. I had done it for several years only in black and white and put together a dummy, and then I realized I have to start all over again and do it in color. So I did lots of things in color. I went to India, got a lot of things in India. India was my first trip in '86. I got a grant for the for the Trottoirs. I got a grant to go around the world. And in France, it's very funny because to do the sidewalks, it's c'est les trottoirs, and faire le trottoir means you're kind of whoring. So I asked for a grant pour faire le trottoir to the French government, and they make a yellow book where they put all the grants, and they saw that a German photographer once fell a trottoir with French money. So they called me and said, I was on an island. They said, you have to come immediately and show us your portfolio. So I did, and they said, okay, go and do it. So this was Hong Kong. This was pretty difficult to get. I knew the constructor on the island when this was happening. He was a friend of friends where I was staying. But it took me 1 week on the telephone, and I finally only got the permission to go on the island when the construction was going on through the embassy, the French embassy in Washington. And when I got to the island, I was only allowed to stay down there, below the statue. And the guy looked around who had come on the same boat, and he said, okay, let's go. And he took me up to the top on an elevator, and then we rushed down in about 10 minutes. And but I got this shot, and this one. And then the book came out, 92. And I did projections. This is not a very good shot. I did projections with big machines and on big buildings in the Printemps de la Photo in Cahors, 94. I only have these 2 shots, and it was pouring rain, and all the people that had come especially for that, the press and everybody, stayed in a cafe drinking. But I continued doing them. And every time I travel, I'm amazed what I can still find. These are recent shots. So now I'm preparing a new book. This is in Ethiopia, also in Ethiopia. This city was one of the most amazing ones. It was full of scaffoldings. So sometimes I'm very lucky. And this was very recently in Sri Lanka. And last week we opened a show in Paris with the scaffoldings. So that was last Wednesday, a week ago. And I continue doing the walls. And now I have the feeling the walls are almost like scaffoldings too. They're kind of almost wrapped, and they have changed, but I think I'm still very amused by walls too. So then I continued also doing the sidewalks. Here you see the first image. It's part of the top row. This one was the first image on the screen. I call this "I'm blowing my mind." I've always done them with always 5 images, sometimes longer. These are reflections in Amsterdam through the ice. So at 10 o'clock and then 12 o'clock, the ice melts slowly. This is one in Africa. And I went to China, and I said to myself, I'm not going to photograph faces and no bicycles. And one day we were waiting to continue. And I walked out, and there was this gray puddle. It was really gray, and all these bicycles going through. And I suddenly was able to shoot this. And it wasn't so gray because the blue reflected, but it looked very gray. So these are ideas of how to use these pictures in a different combination. Then I also did a lot of these things in the street in Paris. There are barrages, and they used for directing water to one side or the other. And these are always, 3 pictures, 70, so they're 2 meters, 10 long. This was a show with the Trottoirs, with these images in the Fondation Miró in Barcelona. And I had put some things on the floor here. And the next day after the opening, we got back, and the cleaning woman had gotten in, and she had cleaned the floor with water. So you know what happens when you get a photograph and a glass plate and water. It gets stuck, and you cannot take it off. You can put it 1 week in the bathtub, it doesn't come off. So we had to throw it all away. And naturally, the museum was not insured, nor was I. So it was quite a lot of money because it was Cyberchromes. This was during Castle, side of, not the official show, but side show. And so I did something with pigeons, dead pigeons in the street, and a lot of pigeon feathers. And then this was, Andre asked me to put some photographs in the Putman, the hotel she did in Hong Kong. So we put the bicycles in the hotel, back to China. This was another way to showing them. And then one day I was sitting waiting for somebody, and I saw this plant, and I suddenly started cutting it up in my mind and did it. And the next day I was into plants, trees, and landscapes. That was like another, after this was another experience where suddenly I knew now it's going to be that. This was in Africa. I did a book on Africa. I traveled to 22 countries, and on traveling for other things, I often find things for myself. This is in Dogon country, in Mali. This was in Shanghai. They're not bamboos, they're actually palm trees, beautiful red. Andre Putman thought of doing this in a bank in Berlin, but unfortunately they didn't do it. It was supposed to be a very, very long, big wall. Then I did a lot of cactus, got into cactus, and did a show with these in the near Paris, 1905. These were all hanging from the ceiling, mounted on aluminum plates. And the next room, there were 2 rooms. In the next room, I did it on bamboo. This is from a garden in Marrakesh. It was very difficult to get the permission. And this was the plant being shown in Marrakesh. Then I also went in, I'm also doing a lot of landscapes. And suddenly there was ice in Geneva. I took a train, I saw one picture on internet, and I took a train down in the morning and shot this and took the train back in the evening. And then later I did some trips through Switzerland to photograph frozen waterfalls. And this was in Geneva. It was light bulbs hanging, and they looked like birds. It was amazing. That was a very cold winter, minus 10 degrees, and there was a lot of wind, and it had gone over all the boats, and it was amazing spectacle. Ice can be quite amazing. Now, sacred trees. I started that on my first trips to India, actually in '86, but not very, once in a while whenever I saw them, and I broke them up also in that sort of thing, which I'm not doing anymore. Now I photograph the whole trees, and in the exhibition you will see, it only has the whole trees. This is the only one in Thailand. The others are all in India. Here, for example, I walked around the tree. You see it, and then it was kind of developed because the 3 faces weren't 3 faces on the same tree. So only by walking around, I could get all the 3 faces. And this was shown in Biennale in Lyon. This was organized by Jean-Hubert Martin again, who did the first show in the Musée National. And the trees are just very amazing. I mean, I've done many, many trips, and I've photographed them now all over India, and sometimes I do now trips just to photograph these, and also whatever I find, even they become shops underneath. For me, they're installations, they're pieces of art, and I have the best time, I must say, of taking a rickshaw in the morning, telling the driver more or less what I wanted. You show them one tree, and then if they're religious enough, or most of them do, and maybe older, they take you to all the trees they know in their city. And the next day, when he asks for more, and he comes back and he shows you more. Everybody asks, these are, for example, these are with objects to ask for babies. Always the cradles are always asking for babies. Last year I was able to do a trip with a boat on the Ganges, and I found some which I would otherwise never have found, because we went to places where nobody goes normally, like this. It's quite a holy city, but I would have never gotten there. I wouldn't have known about it. And there the guy sits every day in the tree and plays Hanuman. Makes good money with that. I mean, it's just, you couldn't even, if you wanted to design something like this, I think you wouldn't be able to, because it's just grown over the years, and everything in India is crazy. I mean, there's no more crazy country than India, but it's incredible. It's the most photogenic country in the world, I think. Now I'm preparing a book on this. These are some double pages, so you see some, how they might work together. Relationship between two on a page. I love these sort of statues. Then I had a show in Madras. It was a poetry festival, actually, and they asked me if I want to participate. And I sent the prints, and they asked me, how big do you want to make them? And they never answered. And then I got there and saw that in the city. And then this in a park, 4.5 meters high. That's, I don't know, in feet. And then the show moved to 7 cities in India, with the Alliance Française and the Goethe Institute. And was always shown outside. And then we did the same show in Chaumont, where we also showed the video that you're seeing in the gallery this afternoon. And then I showed the sacred trees in the Chapelle du Tau in Reims. It was the chapel, the private chapel of the Archbishop, and we showed the video on the altar. But the chapel is not used anymore. Now this you will see this afternoon. Sacred trees in the Evergreen Gallery. And the video. Then another theme is the huts in Africa and in India. I love, from architecture, I love the small architecture. I love mud huts, and I love these huts, and I think they're just amazing. These are in Bombay. I photographed a whole street, like huts after hut after hut after hut. Every one of, and I could put them all together, but I haven't had a possibility yet to do that. These were in Mauritania. After having traveled to 22 countries in Africa, I only saw these huts in one country, and only for about 150 kilometers, because it was one tribe who did this. They're actually living in tents next to them, and these are like their first storage place, and some of them are little shops. And I went back to photograph them. I went back to photograph just these. Here you see them where they live in the tents. Cape Town. That place had burned down and they had put it back up. I went to see, this was my second trip to that place outside of Cape Town. I think it's just amazing sometimes how people put together things in a beautiful way with scrap metals. That's in Bombay, part of this street. I went back to, I wanted to photograph these in 6x6, but unfortunately they had all gone. They were destroyed. Structures in Africa. Then huts in Ethiopia, in the south of Ethiopia. There I also photographed portraits. I wish I'd done more. There you have to pay for portraits, but you know, first you're shocked, but actually it's not a bad system because then they make something. It's a give and take. And they were some of the most incredible people there. They decorate, I mean, it's tradition that they decorate themselves, but they also decorate them for people to be photographed. But, you know, the result is quite amazing. Then a lot of a new series, or just a few years old, it comes from the Trottoirs, it comes from the Sidewalks, are reflections. But you have to be very lucky, you know. I'm looking for this for years, and then suddenly one evening in Biarritz, it was just the water was very far out, and it was just the right light, and the water was out at the right time, and I didn't even have my camera with me, so I borrowed a camera and just kept on shooting. Then more of India. This is the festival. These are some of the shots, the headshots of the film you will see in the gallery. But it can also be, you know, it is also a series of photographs, not only film. Then recently I got into these subjects in temples. And so I found on my last trip, I found these carriages on the beach in Pondicherry. But as you can see, I never do one shot. It's always sequences. Doors, they're all right next to each other, you know. It's like one street. Or then I went to the Kumbh Mela and did a story on the tents. Often now I do like 2 shots or 3 shots and then combine them together to be able to blow them up bigger. Then videos. This was a video on moving house, done in Venice, on reflections of houses in Burano, which is an island north of Venice with very colorful houses. Then the Strada Belgola, which you will see here. And recently I did one on construction in Courtrai with a big crane. It was an amazing thing. It was like, because it's a very old building, so in the floors there's sand, and so it's something you cannot get in new buildings. And the crane was just either ripping off whole thing or just then taking out one little detail, one glass plate, and putting it down very carefully. I did a book on fantasy world. It's all the outside environments around the world. That's when I came up here like 10 years ago and photographed some of the outside environments up here north. And I did a book on Indian interiors. And I did 2 books on inside Africa, the houses in 20 countries in Africa. This was, it then came out in a single book, 700, here in the 2 books is 900 pages, and then they brought out 1 copy with 750 pages. I think it's very interesting because it goes from the mud huts to the most modern building in Africa. And then they made some small books out of the big books. And I did photograph gardens. Now, book projects. I have a book project right now on painted houses. And here you see a few pages that how the pages could look like in the north of India. That's a different place. And then a third place, Hazaribagh. I will tell you more about that one. And you see, you have, this means there will be many pages on that subject, but it's just amazing what kind of painted houses there are in the world. I'm not doing Europe or the Western part, I'm only doing the vernacular part. So this is all India. I also put publicity in it, but because I love publicity in these countries. Then Morocco. This is now Africa. Part of it is from the book, the Indian book, the African book, but I continue doing it, and wherever I think I have to go, I go. I went to Ethiopia, for example, to photograph these places. Now, the women of Hazaribagh in Jharkhand, that's a region that I discovered for this book project 3 years ago, and I saw these absolutely incredible paintings. And I went back, this is an entrance hall, They do it freehand only. These are tribal women. So they're not very considered. This is their god sitting on top of an elephant, their tribal god. I'm doing a project right now because I realized that 50% of the paint that last year, beginning of this year, I went back there, and there was only 50% of the painting left because they don't have time anymore. They have less money. There's a lot of open air mining going on. The women are being, the tribals are being pushed from their land without much, the government just pushes them out, and they lose this tradition. So we start making an association. We have just sent the first money over there. They buy, friends of mine that are down there, they buy bags of colors in pigments. They distribute it to the women, the 3 colors they need, and then they pay them a little bit when they paint the houses. So we hope, with 30 euros or $40, you can have a house painted. So we hope to make a big, we hope to have some influence and get, maybe the art will survive. World of Interiors is going to publish an article on this in December, and I'm going back there with a few friends in January and see what they have done. And it's like this is for, these kind of paintings are for harvest time, and other paintings are for wedding time. So they're 2 different ways. Then I have another book project wrapped up. Everything that's wrapped up. Cars. Most of these are in Cairo. Cairo is full of these cars. Motorcycles. This is on the beach in Madras. These are things for children. I photographed them all the one day and went back the next 3 months later, we're all gone. I kind of seem to do things that disappear very quickly. These are fisher nets. They are protected, all these things are protected for the monsoon, in the monsoon time. Or sculptures. Once, I took a flight and I didn't know why I went there, not somewhere else, and was kind of upset. I got out of the airport and saw that. I thought, okay, fine, thanks. I know why I'm here. And then I got involved in another thing in architecture, in learning from vernacular. The university in Lausanne had all the students in the first year, the architecture students, had to make a model of a vernacular building. So over the years, they have a collection of 670 models. And one of the university was going to throw them away because they didn't know what to do with them. And one of the professors said, no, we have to keep them. They're worth something, and so. So he started doing exhibitions, and a friend of us put us together. He said, well, I probably know the woman who has all the pictures you need for these exhibitions. So we met, and since then we have done exhibitions on this subject. So here you see some of the beautiful models. There's a projection of my photographs. And then we also always try and make outdoor. We printed 50 things. So here we showed them in Arles. We didn't have the official permission to put them up. And we just put, because they said, well, the train is running behind it, the TGV is running behind there, but slowly. And you have to have perforated things, but we didn't have the perforated, so we didn't get official permission, so we put them up just the night before. And then the official people walked there, and the director said, oh, and they said, oh, this is nice, this is new. And he said, well, yeah, I never saw that before either. But, you know, they couldn't do anything, it was up. First time we used them we did an exhibition that was to be seen from a little train going up from Montreux to Gstaad, because all the exhibition was up in the hills, in Rossinière. So we put in different places, we put that next to the train, so the people their minds would get to use to vernacular things. And I think it was the first exhibition ever designed to only be seen from a train. Even the cows liked it. The guy first said to me later, well, I thought the cows, it might be a problem for the cows, but they liked it. They didn't mind. Because it made some shadow, actually. Then we used the same in a big building in Vevey. And then we put them in the submarine base in Bordeaux. And there again, you know, the lady said, well, I don't like the big bashes, we don't want them. And then we put up one, and then it became two, and then three, and can we have some more? And then we had this space, and she had tried one, and then she gave me open way, and so I just put them all up. Sometimes you have to be a bit bold. And here was also, this is at Vitra Design Museum in Weil. So the exhibition on the vernacular architecture was inside, and they had allowed us to put 6 bashes here. There. And so we kind of put a bit more, you know, a bit more. And then the director came and saw it, and I said, well, it would be nice to kind of even it out on the left side too. So we did it, and nobody complained. And then we did a show in Simon Bellis. He's the specialist, Colombian architect, the specialist on bamboo. And we did a show on him first somewhere else, and then now this year it was in the bamboozerij. So the bamboo has gotten back to the bamboo. And you see the stands were all made from bamboo. That's it. Thank you very much. All over. That's the painted houses. The one from I was talking that we were supporting, or the book? No, supporting. That's. Do you know Patna, Hazari Bodh Gaya on the right side? Varanasi, Bodh Gaya, Patna. It's around that corner. It used to be Bihar, one of the poorest places. And now they separated Bihar and Jharkhand, so it's down below, it's in Jharkhand. Mm-hmm. I never counted. I will count this afternoon. I'll tell you this afternoon. But I think about maybe 50%. No, not 50%. Less than 50%. There's a lot left in South America that I haven't seen. And well, I mean Russia. You know, if you count it like this, it's so big. I was twice or three times in Russia and China, and yeah, that counts as a country. Maybe 50%. I think every object has like something in it. Well, I like big things, but when I started, there was no possibility of print big, because the what is called, not Sidewalks, from the Diasec was invented in '69 in Switzerland, and then brought to Germany, to Düsseldorf, in the '80s. Somebody in Düsseldorf bought it. So in the '80s, the possibility in Diasec was that you can use several widths of print and you don't see the seams. That was the big invention of Diasec. So it was for the first time that you could print large. Because in the light, we actually in Expo 67 in Montreal, we used big light boxes where we used several widths of film, but you could still see the seam. So only with Diasec then was invented that you could print larger without seeing a seam. So up to then you could only use the width of either color or black and white paper. So you were limited. That's why it was a way of, if you break up things, first of all, you can make it bigger, and you can also store it easier. And you can easier shoot when you're traveling. And since I was moving always, I had a 35mm camera, and I had a 6x7, the Mamiya 7, which was very light, which is like a Leica, and you know, you can put it in a little bag. But I never wanted to be, you know, I never wanted to have too many things, so I couldn't move anymore, or travel with a big tripod. I think, you know, it's a different way of shooting. I think some people, they make big images and they spend enormous amount of time on that one image. I just read that one photographer, for example, makes 4 images a year, you know. It's not my way of working. So by breaking it down, it's a way of being able to make it bigger without having all this heavy equipment. So sometimes, you know, I break it up in 2. Now with digital, it's fantastic because you can shoot the same thing and stitch it together. So I love that. I love doing that. So I do that quite often now. So I don't break it up in, not so many times in many pictures anymore.
This is sort of a thematic thing, the architecture early and topography as well, very structural things, and then moving into more organic structures in combination. And I was wondering, there seems to be, I'm trying to find the question in this, a tension between utility and whatever it is that lies opposite utility, life maybe, I might be biased, and how you address that, these very structural, constructed, utile things, and then the aesthetic elements as well. Again, I'm not sure exactly where the question is in this, and I apologize. But just how you approach that as an artist, as a photographer, this pull between the utility element of these structures and the I guess aesthetic or more organic elements.
Well, I think the world is so complicated and different and has all these elements in it. So I think you just have to be open to all elements. And it doesn't, I like trees just as much as a hut. Or
Yeah.
I think they're both fascinating.
Does that answer?
Like I said, it wasn't much of a question. I was just sort of wondering. It was a thing running through my mind. But yes, thank you.
Hi, so since excuse me, you revisit your sites very often, do you ever find that when you revisit a site that you hold certain expectations of what you're going to find, and do you ever have like an emotional response to the result? Because you revisit what you photograph often. So do you ever find that like you're expecting something when you go there, or that you have maybe you're let down by something that's not as cool as you thought it was going to be, or something like that?
I don't revisit that often, actually, but it's only when, I was looking for that wall. I went to Barcelona and said, I'm going to look for that wall. Is it still there? Or when I go to Berlin, I've tried to find it. Again, I found it once 10 years after, and then I tried again and I didn't find it. It doesn't happen so often. It's very rare that you find these timepieces, actually. It doesn't happen very often. But so far, I think it was pretty lucky.
I really appreciate how I feel like you become interested in something, or there's like, because I feel like there's certain things that we call attention to that comes back over and over again without us even noticing, but you collect these things for other people to notice, and I really enjoy that. And before I started school, I didn't live anywhere for a long time, and I traveled, but only around our country, because I could do that for free, pretty much. And I noticed that there's something going on within the U.S. at least, where our ruins are kind of like a lot of them are torn down, but there's a thing happening, especially in the Rust Belt, where the ruins, instead of being torn down, are being hollowed out, and then they're just turning them into shopping centers or things like that, like outside, like steel mills being turned into outside shopping malls. And there's this weird transformation and like cross of like architectural history that's happening here. And I was wondering, because it seems like you photograph and you document things as they disappear and as they transform, and these exteriors that we walk through all the time, if that's something or a pattern that you've noticed globally, or if you've seen that in other countries, or if you've ever documented that, or if that's even something that interests you. Are these like ruins that are being carved out?
Well, the walls that I did, they are ruins, and I'm very, very interested in that theme. And if I was living in America, I would certainly go to all these cities and do it. But I live now in Paris, and but I was thinking several times of coming over and doing them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but like Detroit has been done by 2 French photographers very, very well. So I don't think there's much more to do in Detroit. Well, you probably find other things, but it's difficult if something has been done to that extent to do it later. But all this, what's happening now in America, I think there's an enormous amount of possibilities of ruins, and I love ruins naturally. Yes,
and it's not like it's really interesting because it's not just in their continual ruining, but the fact that they're being utilized as like points of like consumer interest that I find really fascinating.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
All these subjects, very much.
So I was curious about the support of the association and the women painters. Is there a way for people other people to be involved in helping?
Yeah, I could give you my email, and we are going. The association is not ready yet. We are going to make it in the next few months. With my email, anybody can get involved in it, and with not much, with $40 you can make one house. With $100 you can make 4 houses in one village or 3, and there are 200 villages in that area where women live that have the tradition of painting, and where the painting could either be sustained or revived. Yeah.
And it goes not to just continue the painting, but to improve their lives.
Well, I think whatever your environment is improves your life. They wouldn't make any money out of it. Well, there's also the possibility, naturally, of tourism. Because the tourism, it's not a touristic area. But the tourist board got recently interested in that area, and they built 7 very elegant huts and a thing to eat. But in the village, a few kilometers away, the paintings are going away. So once they start the tourism and the painting is not there anymore, there will be no tourism. So through tourism, there could be income, because everybody can pay. If it's organized, then every woman whose house you visit, you give some money. So it could be an income for these women too. Yeah. Yeah, it both goes together. It's a very good question. Yeah.
I'm curious about sort of the progression that kind of happened over time with your work, and I guess one thing that I'm looking at is there's an image that you had that was this kind of folded paper with A's on it, and then the A was it was kind of shaped like this, and then the A was in the center, but then there was all these places where there was just kind of these textures and these forms, and I guess I'm kind of looking at your earlier work of the walls, and how maybe it doesn't matter so much where that wall is or how it's created, but it's more of looking at this textural element that kind of happened haphazardly and maybe passively or something, and then kind of also in the vein of taking pictures of walls and then watching how they change over time, and versus in your later work where it's the A, where in these images it matters where those trees are, it matters what people are doing with the trees and what they're putting there in the real world rather than on the surface of the image. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that change throughout your work at all.
Well, the A was a graphic design piece. It was not a photographic piece. The walls, well, the world changes. When you saw, for example, what I'm photographing now in walls, these old walls hardly exist anymore, very few. So now it becomes different. Now they become more walls of construction. These other walls have gone. So I think I change with what changes around me. Or I change, when I travel, I see something and suddenly I'm fascinated by that. I'm taking it more. That's why also I'm happy I'm a photographer and not a painter, because I'm not working in my head in my studio, but I take things from the world. No, not that I'm happy, but this is how I work. This is how I work more. I realized when I changed to photography that it was a more direct way for me to do what I saw and what my interest was.
Your photography kind of inspired me because your first photos were just with a regular camera, and they're beautiful photos. Do you have any advice for people who aren't necessarily photographers but are interested in the art of things? Or if you hadn't taken those photos, people wouldn't know it was there. You did something very important. And do you have any advice on how other people can do things even if we don't have the kind of experience?
It's a last question. Very vast. It's kind of a life question. I mean, everybody has to find his way, and but I think the world is so interesting around us that it's worth looking at things, trying to do it, and now with the digital age, it's much easier to, before it was, first of all, it was expensive. Now you have to buy the camera, but then it doesn't cost you anything, just is your time. And well, if you want to print, it costs a little bit. But just play around, go ahead, do it. Have fun.
Okay, it is 1 o'clock. If people want to get going, and maybe the rest of the questions, if you could come up here or come to the opening at 5 o'clock.